Hello, good morning. We are the team number 1 and we are going to talk about chapter 1 and chapter 2. First of all, we need to know what is a sustainable development. Sustainable development is a basic concept for our age. It is about a way of understanding the world in a method for solving global problems. Sustainable development goal will guide the global economy policy for the next generation. The starting point is a outer planet. Today, 7 billion people live there. Approximately 9 times the 100 million people in a house in 1115 at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The world population continued to rise and rate by about 75 million people per year. These impacts are so important for the planet that the planet is currently experiencing unquestionable alteration in some life-dependent processes such as water, nitrogen, and carbon cycles. The poor struggle to get food and water and healthcare and shelter they need to get more survival. Government must ensure many basic functions. One of these is an education, health, protection about the violence and the crime, the provision of roads, sports, and power supply, introduction of environmental protection and regulation. We will see environmental threats arise to different fronts. Humanity is changing the planet climate, fresh water, ocean chemistry, and other species habitat. Sustainable development aims to understand the interaction between three complex systems. The first, the global economy, then the global society, and the physical environment of the earth. Sustainable development also implies a normative approach to the planet. It said that it recommends a number of objectives to the world should aspire. Countries are approved to the CDG precisely as a guide for a future development to the economy and society for the planet. 9 times the 100 million people in house in 1715 at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The world's population continued to rise in rapid rate by about 75 billion people per year.
Subtitle number 2, called An Introduction to Economic Growth, talks about how they measure this economic growth, and it's by the GDP, Gross Domestic Product. We all should know what this is, but I will give you a tiny introduction to this. So the GDP measures the market value of total production within a country in a given period, usually a year. The GDP measures the production inside the boundaries of a country. GDP is expressed in the national currency, such as dollars, pesos, euros, yuan, etc. GDP does not measure the bads or harms that often accompany the production. So economic growth measures the change of the GDP in a given period. For there to have an economic growth, we have to have an increase in the GDP. The key of these concepts is that the world economy has been growing since the start of Industrial Revolution. One reason for the rise in the world's population is the increased ability for growing more food. An excellent example for this is China. China's growth is superlative in every aspect. But how is this possible? Easy. China has become the world's largest trading country and the industrial workshop of the world. The economy has become from rural to urban. They passed to be agricultures to be industrial workers. The bad side of China's growth is that in those 3 decades there was massive immigration. In that meaning, China has not achieved sustainable development. The good side when a country has rapid growth is when they improve in aspects like medicine, public health, and similar things. Now, the third subtitle, called Continuing Poverty in the Midst of Plenty. We're going to describe what is poverty. Poverty is described as the lack of adequate income, and then we have extreme poverty. Extreme poverty is the lack of basic human needs like water, electricity, education, or a house where to live. There are multiple damages to the planet. If there is a crisis, not only the poor get affected, also the rich people. You may be asking, why should we get worried? Well, all our civilization is getting in danger. The earth will get much warmer, the sea level is going to increase, and there will be a loss of biodiversity.
Hello guys, I will be talking about today about some global environmental threats that are caused by economic development. So first, let me say that economic growth means an increase in real output. So that means is a real increase on the GDP. Therefore, with increased output and consumption, they are likely to see costs imposed on the environment. The environmental impact of economic growth includes the increased consumption of non-renewable resources and higher levels of pollution. So, global warming and the potential loss of environmental habitats creates these threats to the environment. Also, pollution, consumption of fossil fuels can lead to immediate problems such as poor air quality and damage to the nature. Also, global warming, soil erosion, there's a lot of loss of biodiversity, and we need to take care of those threats to the environment. We need to take care of the world, and also there's some pathways to sustainable development. There's this we have to preserve the ecosystem. We have to conserve the pathways to this sustainable new life that we have to choose. And the ultimate aim of sustainable development is to conserve the earth. I mean, we live here. Conservation of biodiversity is a nice and the cleanest and the best way to have a sustainable development of this society that we live in. So, therefore, we can have a pretty good life and a quality life. So, we must protect ourselves, the environment.
Hello, I'm going to talk to you about the first two subtitles of the second chapter, which is called An Unequal World. The first subtitle is Incomes Around the World, and it's basically talking about the GDP and the different incomes of different countries and why is it like that. So GDP means the total production of the boundaries inside of a country, and it's generally expressed in the last year. We also have the GDP per capita, which is the GDP divided by the population of the country. So the World Bank places three main categories, which is the high income, middle income, and low income of GDP per capita. So a GDP per capita below $1,000 is a low income. A GDP per capita from $1,000 to $12,000 is a middle income, and a high income is $12,000 or more per person a year. No, so we have United States, Canada, Europe, Japan, Australia. All these countries have a high income, and they usually measure, the governments and banks usually measure this as a good thing, and they usually use the GDP per capita to measure this kind of stuff, to see how well the human well-being is. But this chapter is all about telling us that the measurements have a lot more factors to it than just the GDP per capita. So the second topic is called urban and rural inequality. So this talks about, just generally speaking, to summarize this, it talks about how urban life, which is the city, technology, industry, is taking over rural in income. So there's a big gap of inequality there. So urban life is as we know it, it's all the technology changes, the industry changes, which usually pay more than rural life, which is the field and you can say the primal activities of world, uh, which is agriculture, I don't know, other kind of primal activities. And it basically just talks about that in a lot of words. It's just telling us that urban life has a higher income than rural life because it's just more tendency of world, and there's a big gap of inequality there.